Hello, Americans. As a human species body of individual bodies, we ha- before the sciences became criminally foreign influence, the human species body was following that which is generating all differences grouped. We could be and stay systems other. We could even, countries A through Z agreed to, but nature will still demonstrate that we have been using systems tactically from its own. This has been since before modern religious messengers were born. This is more practical and probable to theorize, let alone to convict. The reason when inside when people would say, "Oh, that's debatable," you guys are quoting books that have criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw, fact treatment, nature, quality aspects in nature, and collusions. So, for example, Judge Napolitano is asking questions. He's speaking with intelligence community between Russia and America and Ukraine and all these different countries, A through Z. But Russia and Ukraine right now, for example, while people are dying in Palestine, even just starving to death. Same thing with Ukraine. And Russians are dying. They're in a war. We're still having wars while America and Russia have suburbs that were designed for the torture, the back treatment nature, extortion, and slavery of our founders who did not have free speech. They declassified this. Why are their words used, leaving out what they declassified about why and how they had no free speech, leaving out what they communicated about how a breaching method reassigned, what nature communicates to us with black pupils, whites of eyes, being the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. For example, we're learning about difference. We are different from the other species bodies, but even fish have two eyes, distinctly but non-distinctly, and simultaneously we are, as the human species body of individual bodies, and as the other species bodies of individual bodies, too, with all group differences demonstrated to us that they're being generated by that which is not us nor them, but is all things other anyway. And many pray now for reasons not natural, only natural as criminal insidiousness that everyone has to overcome. But the breaching method knew that everyone would only be capable more and more of blaming other things, others ourselves, for things that it caused and for things that it maintains. And then while self-valuing that having been, we have to address, we have to be led by the invisible, but hyper invisible, but still discernible. For example, precedents and statutes and readings of it, appreciation of it, alone they are not positive. Peace too. Peace, there are criminal insidious natures of peace. To show us, nature shows us there is a distinct nature of hyper peace that we all long. We don't long to hunger and thirst through suburbs that were designed before America's founders were born to torture them, extort themselves, and make them pretend other. And to an extent, otherwise that body was sensed and that was adapted to. That's including if that body was a majority of people, including if that body was every single body, black people. We are in a semi-ancient trap that came from before modern religious messengers were born. Thank God. There are proofs that they preserved the God variable, but this is what you're praying to figure out. Part of what you're praying. You're also praying to have overcome the hyper criminally foreign influence, worse than terrorists. When did witch trials stop being about with the crazy laws against everyone multi-front against the native, and they're making it like separate rights. The experts on law how they entertained so we have to address the principles from the youngest ages. In other words, our founders communicated for us to understand the breaching method reassigned black people's whites of eyes. The breaching method only allowed roles with it. And everyone had to speak about positive. They could speak about positive or negative, or what that caused. All the nature's demonstration had to blame it on other things, others themselves, rather than the breaching method. On a mass scale, they've been attaching everyone to fake to change communications with everyone around them and with themselves, interbranch, but not alone. Not just with other international companies and countries and campuses involved with this. There are predicate acts with facts roles with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organization Act. He has roles with Facebook, with proven child abusers, leaders of cliques, involved with all kinds of natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders against people they don't know at all. And others that they've been pretending behind people's backs since they were kids. Fake ties, fake natures of ties to other people. The only time context I know, a bunch of people I don't know at all tied to Ray Collusions, who brought themselves up, and the Wethersfield police brought them up. There's more than one Ray Collusions. Wethersfield police brought up the name Collusions, but also a Phil Collusions, Phil. He's involved with whiting forensics and more with a principal upskirt nature. These are names that have roles of other natures of organized crimes in multiple police departments and retired police chiefs. And one was standing police chief, and his reported his daughter and recorded his daughter, and the intimate ties of his family. Therefore, with reportedly with a Mazzucato bakery and people involved with a Maiano family with a modern pastry. And these are also with names like a Maiano per him next to Hartford Hospital, with houses and businesses there, like the Morrow's Market. I don't believe it's there anymore, but where it is now too, and Iola's Kitchen, involved with digital crimes, increasingly with people with whiting forensics, involved with former Mayor Gold family, and people who have been planting evidence on sides of parks and campuses, sequence shifts, fake ties, fake nature ties to me. I never saw a Joe Iola around a campus in my life. The only time I ever saw him on campus, he was influenced to make that exception to play later. And before that, to hide line progressions with former Mayor Gold and people next to him with the fire department, involved with his sister intimately. Involved also with them planting evidence of fake ties, fake nature. That's how to me. Having people see illusions and they make things up in the background. I never even saw him around schools, in other words, a Joe Iola. And that was after he graduated. He went. They had to go out of the way to make life progressions. Increasingly, he's involved with a Maiano family with my neighbors, with the Wethersfield Police Department, who had conversations with them as a kid. And Wethersfield police faked conversations with me. I weren't at all. I wouldn't even go down there as a kid. And when I got arrested, they weren't talking about that, but I had no conversation with the guy that began to speak with me. They just took my fingerprint. When they took me out of the class when I was a sophomore in high school, the people that were in that class, Anthony Yagman and Mike Demain. And then there was one other kid who was reportedly a relative of a Congressman Larson with a different last name. And Anthony Yagman never made one communications. We never had any communications in class. Mike Demain was sitting next to a Jewish-themed teacher who repeated things about one of the young girls that used to live in my area, and her family's still there, and rolls with fire departments, and everyone's speaking through. I never met them. In other words, they're trying to fish for cover-ups because they have a police chief, Cintron, and one years ago, and they have an officer. They have people switching and forging names, not giving their full name. And with interbranch, a whole bunch of people, families within the Britain Superior Court and Harper Courts and Connecticut's District Court. They have a whole bunch of people from other areas that have had roles with some untimely deaths, murders, and body dumping spots, and all these bad things, intercities that were brought up at the same time by them. And in other words, you go to courts, they walk up and say something and they walk away. And they're just putting more and more fake things in databases as collusions with overt criminal enterprises and private ones involved with those same families. And then they start leaking, pretend they have the right to lie and have roles with that. Increasingly, people with the state corrections offices and the state judicial branch offices have roles with a whole bunch of natures of organized crimes. In other words, in other words, when they're supposed to speak about countries, they're saying, "Oh, this is like a guy, Russia, and this is America. America's this type of." In other words, Americans and Russians have roles with psychiatry through world wars together, while they're criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, communicating other than our founders declassified to have communicated for themselves. Self-valued roles, sensing for the breaching method, pretending not to fathom and not fathoming while delusions rot, while tactically delusions rot too, because it could be healed. All battle shield. No, but so they refuse to identify themselves legitimately because they've been just pretending things behind people's backs. The difference of their guilt, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists. What do you think witch trials are about? Don't leave out was sustained then and since before against Native Americans and colonists. In other words, and our founder was even born here. Yeah. Witch trials, slavery is there. Sort of sickly, distinctly, but non-distinctly northern colonies, southern colonies too, and slavery. But you don't leave those things. So, well, let's just focus on the witch trials. Get down. Or gather around. So they refuse to identify themselves legitimately. Increasingly, these are people next to the Connecticut news locations like Channel 3 News, WFSB. They fake conversations with me, and they won't identify themselves. I don't have a phone, and when I tried to call them, they have their phones involved with wire mail crime acts and methods, where they fake transcripts and change digital evidences with the police forms. A bunch of police forms and multiple Connecticut police departments have roles with families near me named Smith and Cologne, with Wethersfield Police, with some foreign and domestic military too. The Eastern States Narcotic Drug Task Force involved with the Dillon family, a whole bunch of people tied to a Kevin Dillon, and people at Hartford Hospital involved with Lombardo, the name Lombardo and Leahy, that put me in fake conversations with themselves, and with Dr. Shamsi Ali. I'm sure he'll tell you that, in other words. And he says you no longer with them. Apparently, they're forging names of doctors, and they're just putting whole quotes to fake and change what's actually recorded at locations, putting fake ties, fake natures of ties to a whole bunch of people tied to the Leahy family from other areas of town and from other towns. I don't know at all. They've been planting evidences, fake ties to me, and I didn't know. In other words, and trying to make it look like they know me from other areas, and they have ties to the same houses who have been roles of police, falsified police reports. Their roles with all natures of investigation, investigators, all sides of criminal and civil cases, criminal and civil, and the courts at the same time with them, and their roles next to the state correction offices and the judicial branch offices with the names added too, involved with them with predicate acts with facts, refusing to identify themselves. Police forms too on my street. You know how creepy that is? Get them on paper with one name and sequence. I shouldn't have to beg. I'm over here begging. Since before Judge Napolitano left Fox News, a bunch of intelligence next to them too in Hartford, Connecticut. That's where next to the state capitol, has something to do with their roles next to Channel 3 News, WFSB too. They're leaking this also by silence. You guys are obligated. They've been planting the news victims because they're victim forgiveness because everyone's victim / hyper victim predator, hyper predator, blaming other things other than themselves, where and how they are victims / hyper victims relative to the human fact achieving nature breaching method. That's one of the things, true always, that nature shows us. Witch trials is about. And you don't leave up the other proofs of it, like the slavery laws, the rackets with the difference between native, American and colonists, and relative to, for example, where it's relative to subjects like the environment, how it's involved with that torture, extortion, fact, achieving nature, slavery method. They have all kinds of drugs and medicines crimes too, and delusions with all kinds of drugs and medicines crimes right through the careers of judges and prosecutors, even the best ones. I think Judge Napolitano's probably one of at least there are way worse judges than him. And I think he's a great judge in a lot of ways too. But some of the words, judges A through Z have failed black people. They won't go correct until we get them to follow mandated law properly, until we pull their delusions onto paper, because they're playing games at those spots. Since originally still they had collusion/yes with all natures of crime scenes. How this is increasingly gotten away with being denied. I recorded a singular method that they don't even understand the extent of. That's why they're not following mandated law, because they're adapting. They're listening to me and trying to adapt, because they've been putting fake things in. They attached me to fake being at the police station and speaking with their officers as a kid, and now as an adult. And then they had to hide lie progression, so they pretended that was the news when I caught them forcing a principal child abuser and wire crime acts and methods they have with the agencies involved and multiple police departments and more teachers and their kids. There's an O'Neill I never met the O'Neill in my life. She's involved with people with a family with the name O'Neill that are educators in West Hartford, Connecticut. They have roles with whiting forensics and with child sexual and medical offenders around their own kids in Wethersfield and other people's kids. Also with the Leahy family. With more with Facebook. Facebook has all kinds of natures of organized crime, acts, and roles. Also with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and the FBI's phones and their roles with databases and their social media. Too, they have organized crimes and criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and precedent. We're going to observe, too, groups that have predicate acts with facts methods, also individually grouped together the branches of government. So you have to get them on paper, one name and sequence, and get WFSB, for example, at the same time. They put me in fake conversations with themselves about the World Trade Center attack, as they're recording themselves with the collusion, with the names involved interstate and internationally, but also hyper internationally. Central Connecticut State University is increasingly involved with them too, with the judicial branch officers, corrections officers of all these countries, and the Saudi attackers. And like with names Scalora, interstates, involved with police, forging names, switching names, making confessions, then running away to make it look like we communicated. Let's get the rest of the confessions and them onto paper, one name and sequence. Judge Napolitano. And get me watch, because they forced this on some, they're still forcing it on the kids. Get me off the fake communications with my family about this still. You guys are hiding what I caught you doing with the principal upskirt nature and the people with the untimely deaths and murders connected intercities that planted evidence on my street. And I had that confirmed on Facebook. No, then they took my Facebook page. They're trying to cover up things too. That's why they had me have 3 different pages. Facebook, get on paper, one name and sequence if you want. Otherwise, you're making it worse and you're proving it. Just follow mandated law for them. Get them on paper with the New Britain Superior Court. New Britain Superior Court has rape threats. Then they made a whole bunch of other different pages. That was recorded proofs of their collusions and confirmation. Harper Courts and the Britain Superior Court at West Hartford locations and with one's intercities of Connecticut. They've been planting evidences before the World Trade Center attack. Rules of organized crime, acts, and methods. Like wire crime, they put whole fake transcripts. You're going to watch it. Really. No side has representation. Black people.